Cole stood in the main training hall of Sentinel Prime, looking at the other students around her. The Galactic Combat Academy was the best military school in known space. Getting accepted here meant something. For a human, it meant even more. She was the only human in a class of 25 students. The others came from species that had been traveling between stars for centuries. Humans had only made first contact 5 years ago. Most of the galaxy still thought of Earth as a backwater planet full of weak creatures. The training hall was massive. The ceiling stretched up 50 feet. The walls were lined with weapons from a dozen different worlds. In the center, thick mats covered the floor. This was where they would learn to fight. Had arrived on the station 3 weeks ago. The journey from Earth took 2 weeks through 7 different jump gates. Her family had a long military history. Her father served in the Marines for 20 years. Her grandfather fought in World War II. She grew up in dojos and training gyms, learning judo, Brazilian, and boxing. The other students were already gathered when the instructor walked in. Had heard about Instructor before meeting him. Everyone had. He was a legend at the academy. 30 years of training soldiers. Decorated veteran of 4 different wars. He never accepted failure and pushed his students harder than any other instructor. That meant he stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and thick gray skin. His people came from a high-gravity world where only the strong survived, were known across the galaxy as warriors. They took pride in their physical power. The instructor stopped at the front of the room and looked at each student. His eyes were dark and cold. When his gaze reached, it paused for just a moment longer than the others. She kept her face blank and her posture straight. "I am Instructor," he said. His voice was deep and carried easily through the hall. "You are here because someone thinks you have potential. I will decide if they were right or wrong. 40% of my students quit before graduation. Most of them quit in the first month." He began walking along the line of students. "The galaxy is not kind to the weak. If you cannot handle my training, you will not survive real combat. I will push you until you break or until you become strong enough to stand with the best." Noticed he said nothing about humans, nothing direct anyway. But when he mentioned soft and garden planet species, his eyes flicked toward her. The first day focused on basic physical testing. They ran obstacle courses. They climbed walls. They carried weights across the training floor, finished every test. She was not the fastest or the strongest, but she completed each one without stopping. A student named Kay ran beside her during the final lap. Were tall and thin with green skin and large eyes. They were known for being quick and precise. "You are doing well," Kay said between breaths. "Better than expected, I think." Glanced at the instructor. He was watching her with his arms crossed. His expression showed disappointment. He had wanted her to fail. When the testing finished, called them all together. "Adequate," he said. "Most of you performed at the minimum acceptable level. Some of you exceeded that, some of you barely met it." His gaze landed on again. "I have trained soldiers from 60 different species. Each one brings different strengths. Some are fast, some are strong, some are clever, but strength and speed and intelligence mean nothing without discipline and courage. We will see which of you have those qualities." During the break, several students gathered near the water station. Filled her bottle and stepped back, not wanting to push into the group. She had learned quickly that many species found humans strange. Too emotional, too aggressive, too fragile. Kay approached her with genuine curiosity. "I have never met a human before. Tell me, does Earth really have only one gravity?" "Yes," said, "standard gravity, same as this station." A student nearby laughed, looked similar to humans but were taller and heavier. They had thick bones and dense muscle. "Your world must be paradise, no real challenges. No wonder your people are so soft." Did not respond. She had heard this before. The galaxy measured species by their home world's difficulty. High gravity, dangerous predators, harsh climate. These things supposedly made strong species. Earth, with its moderate climate and single gravity, seemed easy by comparison. Was standing close enough to hear. He made a sound that might have been agreement. "Humans have no real wars in their history, a few tribal conflicts, nothing compared to the great wars of galactic civilization." His jaw tightened, but she kept quiet. Earth had thousands of years of warfare. Millions had died in conflicts across the planet. But the galactic database had incomplete information about human history. They saw Earth's current peace and assumed it had always been that way. "Tomorrow we begin combat assessment," announced to the whole class. You will be paired for sparring. I will evaluate your technique and your spirit. Strength alone is not enough. You must have the will to use it. He looked directly at when he said it. The message was clear. He thought she lacked both strength and will. The class ended and students filed out toward the barracks. Walked alone, thinking about what was coming. She had trained her whole life for this, not just for the academy, but to prove something, to show that humans belonged out here among the stars. Other species had size advantages. They had natural weapons or thick armor like skin. Humans did not have those things, but humans had learned to fight without them. They developed techniques that did not require strength. They studied leverage and timing and balance. Had thrown men twice her size in competition. She had submitted opponents who outweighed her by 100 pounds. Size mattered, but it was not everything. Was about to learn that lesson. She reached her quarters and sat on the narrow bed. The room was small and plain. The morning alarm came early. Was already awake, staring at the ceiling of her quarters. She had slept poorly, running through scenarios in her mind. Today was combat assessment day. Today would try to prove she did not belong here. She dressed in her training uniform and headed to the mess hall. A few other students were already there, eating in silence. The mood was tense. Everyone knew what was coming. Kay waved her over to a table that was eating something that looked like purple paste. Did you sleep well? Well enough, lied. She picked at her own food, a protein mixture that was supposedly balanced for human nutrition. It tasted like cardboard. We'll pair us for sparring today, Kay said quietly. He always matches students carefully, sometimes too carefully. Understood what the meant, would use the pairings to make a point, to show who was strong and who was weak. The training hall was already set up when they arrived. Thick mats covered the entire floor. The other 3 instructors sat in the observation deck above, watching through the transparent wall. Stood in the center of the hall with his 4 arms crossed. Combat assessment, he announced as students filed in. You will each face an opponent in controlled sparring. The goal is not to win. The goal is to show me what you have learned. Show me if you have the instinct for battle. He began calling out pairs. Against another. Against a. He matched them by weight and size, giving each student a fair challenge. Began to relax slightly. Maybe she had been wrong about his intentions. Then he called her name. Cole, you will face en. And was a male who stood nearly 7 feet tall. He weighed at least twice what did, maybe more. His species had thick bones and natural physical power. The pairing was clearly unfair. Stepped onto the mat and looked uncomfortable. He was not a cruel person, just large. He clearly did not want to hurt her. Begin, said. And moved slowly, giving time to react. He reached for her with obvious reluctance, ducked under his arm and swept his leg. The big stumbled but did not fall. He had good balance. They circled each other, stayed light on her feet, watching his weight distribution. When he grabbed for her again, she redirected his force and threw him with a basic hip toss, and hit the mat hard but not painfully. The match continued for 3 minutes. Could not overpower him, but she avoided his attacks and landed several clean techniques. When time was called, both of them were breathing hard. His expression was unreadable. Adequate footwork, lucky timing, next pair. Lucky, he called it lucky, bit back her response and stepped off the mat. Several students looked at her with new respect, and himself nodded to her as they passed. The sparring continued through the morning. Every student faced their match, commented on each performance, pointing out mistakes and occasionally praising good technique. He said nothing more about his match. After sparring came tactical training. They gathered in a classroom where displayed holographic battle scenarios. He talked about military history, showing examples from wars across the galaxy. The Battle of Prime, he said, showing an image of a massive space engagement. 60,000 ships, 3 species fighting for control of a strategic system. This is real war. This is what soldiers face. He turned to look at the class. Some species have rich military traditions. They have fought for thousands of years. They understand the cost of war and the necessity of strength. His eyes found in the group. Other species have lived in peace. They know nothing of true conflict. They think their small struggles count as warfare. Raised her hand, looked annoyed but nodded to her. Earth has a long history of warfare, she said calmly. Thousands of years of conflicts. Millions have died in various wars throughout our history. Tribal conflicts, dismissed. Primitive weapons, nothing like modern warfare. We developed nuclear weapons, continued. Weapons powerful enough to destroy our entire planet. We came close to using them several times. We chose not to. His expression hardened. Having powerful weapons means nothing if you lack the will to use them. That is weakness, not wisdom. Other students shifted uncomfortably. The tension in the room was obvious, forced herself to stay quiet. Arguing would only make things worse. The afternoon brought more physical training. They practiced formation movements and squad tactics, pushed them hard, calling for faster responses and better coordination. He was equally harsh with everyone, but felt his attention on her constantly. When they finally broke for the day, was exhausted. Her muscles ached and her mind was worn from staying alert. She headed toward the barracks, wanting nothing more than a shower and her bed. Kay caught up with her in the corridor. You did well today. That match within was impressive. Thanks, said, though did not seem to think so. Kay's large eyes showed concern. He has done this before. Last year a human student was in his class, very skilled, good scores in all tests, failed him anyway, said he lacked warrior spirit. Stopped walking. What happened to that student? He left the academy, went back to Earth. Many of us thought it was unfair, but is a senior instructor. His decisions are rarely questioned. They reached the barracks and went to their separate rooms, showered and changed into clean clothes. She should have felt better, but the conversation with Kay bothered her. Had already decided she would fail. Nothing she did would change his mind. She sat at her small desk and opened her data pad. The Academy library had extensive information on combat techniques from across the galaxy. She searched for fighting styles and watched several demonstration videos. Relied on strength and reach. Their forearms gave them obvious advantages, but they moved in predictable patterns. They expected opponents to meet force with force. What would happen if an opponent used a different approach? Spent 2 hours studying before her eyes grew too tired to continue. She closed the data pad and lay down. Sleep came slowly again. The next 2 days followed the same pattern. Hard training. Constant criticism. Performed well in every exercise but never well enough to satisfy the instructor. He found fault with everything she did. During a tactics exercise, he questioned her decisions. During endurance training, he suggested she was barely keeping up. During weapons practice, he said her form was sloppy. None of it was true, but he said it loudly enough for others to hear. Some students began to look at her with pity, others with respect for how she handled the treatment, kept her face neutral and her responses professional. Getting angry would only prove right. On the 4th day, announced a change in schedule. This afternoon, we will focus on hand-to-hand combat techniques. Real combat, not sports sparring. I will demonstrate proper form and effective methods. He called a volunteer to the center of the mat. A student named N stepped forward, showed a throwing technique, using 2 of his arms to control N's upper body while sweeping his legs. The movement was powerful but not particularly technical. This is how you handle an opponent, explained. You use your strength to dominate, you give them no chance to resist. He released N and looked at the class. I need another volunteer, someone to practice defensive techniques. No one moved. The students had learned to avoid volunteering for Demon. The training hall was completely silent. 24 students stood in a circle around and, above them, 3 instructors watched from the observation deck. The moment stretched out, heavy with tension. Approached with lazy confidence. His forearms hung loose at his sides. He was not worried about defense. Why would he be? He outweighed by 200 pounds. He stood nearly 3 feet taller. His species had evolved for combat on a harsh world where only the strong survived. Watched his feet. That was the key to everything. Feet showed where the weight was. Feet showed where the movement would go. Was walking flat-footed, his weight distributed evenly. He expected this to be easy. Pay attention, said to the class without looking away from. Watch how a trained soldier handles an inferior opponent. Speed and strength determine the outcome of real combat. He reached for her with his upper 2 arms. The movement was casual, almost dismissive. He planned to grab her uniform and simply pull her off balance. Then he would throw her, hard enough to make an example, but not hard enough to cause serious injury. It would be humiliating. That was the point. Did not resist the grab. This was the first lesson her judo instructor had taught her years ago. Never fight force with force when you are smaller. Use the opponent's strength against them. Move with the attack, not against it. His hands closed on her uniform. He began to pull, expecting resistance that never came, stepped forward instead of back, moving with his pull rather than fighting it. The shift in direction surprised him. His balance wavered for just a fraction of a second. That fraction was all she needed. His left hand shot up and grabbed his lead arm at the elbow. Her right hand gripped his wrist. She pivoted her hips, turning her body underneath his center of mass. This was Ippon Nage, the shoulder throw, one of the first techniques students learned in judo, also one of the most effective. Realized something was wrong. His eyes widened slightly. He tried to pull back, but his own momentum was working against him now. Had control of his arm, and her hips were positioned perfectly under his balance point. She dropped her weight and pulled down hard on his arm. At the same time, she drove her hips up and back. Leverage and timing did what strength could not. His feet left the mat. Time seemed to slow down. The massive instructor flipped completely over shoulder. His body rotated in the air, arms flailing uselessly. For a moment, all 8 feet and 300 pounds of him were airborne. Then gravity remembered its job. Crashed onto the mat with an impact that echoed through the training hall. The sound was enormous in the silent room. He landed flat on his back, the air forced from his lungs in a loud gasp. The mat absorbed some of the impact, but not all of it. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Released his arm and stepped back immediately. Proper technique required maintaining control until the throw was complete, then releasing safely. She had done exactly that. She adjusted her uniform with quick, practiced movements. The throw had pulled the fabric slightly out of place. Lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling. His brain struggled to process what had just happened. One moment he was in control. The next moment he was on the ground. The human had thrown him. The small, weak human from the garden world had put him on his back. The silence in the hall was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. The students stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. In the observation deck, the 3 instructors leaned forward with shocked expressions. Looked down at, her face was calm. No anger, no triumph, just professional neutrality. She had done what needed to be done, nothing more. "Is class over, instructor?" she asked. Her voice was perfectly respectful, perfectly professional, but there was steel underneath the words, a quiet strength that could not be ignored. She was not mocking him. She was not gloating. She was simply asking a question and waiting for an answer. The question hung in the air. Is class over? Are you finished trying to humiliate me? Have you learned what you needed to learn? Continued to stare up at her. His pride hurt worse than his body. He had been teaching combat for 30 years. He had trained some of the best soldiers in the galaxy. He had fought in 4 wars and earned more commendations than he could count. And a human half his size had just thrown him like a training dummy. Slowly, he pushed himself up into a sitting position. His back ached where it had hit the mat. Nothing was broken, but he would feel this tomorrow. He had been thrown before in his long career, but never like this. Never so completely, never so easily. The students began to react. A few shifted their weight nervously, others exchanged glances. N, the student, had his mouth hanging open. K looked impressed and slightly afraid at the same time. In the observation deck, Instructor stood up slowly. She was a female with silver skin and sharp eyes. She had been teaching at the academy almost as long as. Her expression showed surprise, but also something else. Respect, maybe, or approval. Got to his feet. It took longer than it should have. His legs felt unsteady. He stood at full height and looked down at who stood calmly at attention. Her stance was perfect. Her breathing was controlled. She showed no sign of the effort the throw had required. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to rage at this embarrassment. But anger would only make things worse. Every eye in the hall was on him. Every student was waiting to see how he would respond. This moment would define him more than any lecture or demonstration. "Class continues," he said finally. His voice was rougher than normal. "Return to your positions." The students scrambled to obey, relieved to have something to do. The circle broke apart as they moved to the edge of the mat. Remained where she was, waiting for further instructions. Looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her perhaps for the first time. He had seen her as weak, as inferior, as a symbol of humanity's inadequacy. He had been wrong. "Where did you learn that technique?" he asked. "Judo instructor," replied. "A martial art developed on Earth over a century ago. It focuses on throws and grappling." "And you have trained in this judo?" Since I was 6 years old, instructor, 12 years of training. 12 years. She had been studying combat techniques since she was a child. While he had dismissed her people as primitives, they had been developing fighting systems that worked despite physical limitations. Nodded slowly. The technique was sound, your execution was precise. The words tasted strange in his mouth. Admitting this went against everything he had believed about humans. Thank you, instructor. However, he continued, trying to regain some authority, this was a controlled demonstration. Real combat is different. Yes, instructor, agreed, but her eyes said something else. They said she knew the difference and was ready for it. Turned to address the class. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Never underestimate an opponent based on appearance alone. Size and strength are advantages, but they are not everything. Technique and training matter as well. He paused, then added, Cole, you are dismissed for the day. Report to Commandant Al's office immediately. His expression did not change, but inside, her stomach dropped. Being sent to the Commandant meant serious consequences. She had defended herself against what was clearly meant to be a humiliating demonstration, but she had still thrown a senior instructor. The Academy might see that as unacceptable regardless of the circumstances. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect from her judo training. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Every student watched her go. Some faces showed admiration, others showed concern. Kay looked worried. As left the training hall, she heard resume teaching. His voice was steady but lacked its usual confidence. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone knew it. The corridor outside was empty. His hands shook slightly now that no one could see them. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving her feeling drained. She had done what needed to be done. She had stood up to the humiliation and proved herself, but what would it cost her? She made her way through the station toward the Commandant's office. Other students passed her in the halls, none of them from her class. They did not know what had just happened. News would spread quickly, though. By tomorrow, everyone on Sentinel Prime would know that a human had thrown Instructor. The Commandant's door was closed when she arrived. She pressed the call button and waited. Her heart was still racing. Everything she had worked for, everything she had traveled across space to achieve, might end right here. Enter, came a voice from inside. The Commandant's office was larger than expected. One entire wall was transparent, showing the stars beyond the station. The other walls displayed commendations and awards from dozens of worlds. Weapons from various species hung in careful arrangements. This was a room that spoke of long service and hard-won respect. Commandant Al sat behind a curved desk made of dark metal. He was lichened, but older and heavier. His skin had the gray tone that came with age for his species. Scars crossed his thick arms, visible even through his uniform. He had been a soldier long before becoming an administrator. Cadet Cole, he said without looking up from the data pad in his hands. Sit. Sat in the chair across from his desk. She kept her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Whatever was coming, she would face it with dignity. Al touched the data pad and a holographic display appeared above his desk. It showed the training hall from multiple angles, security footage. He pressed a control and the image moved, showing the past hour in fast motion. Watched herself throw. From this angle, the technique looked even more dramatic. The instructor flipped completely over and crashed hard. Al watched the footage 3 times without speaking. His face showed no emotion. Finally, he set down the data pad and looked at. His eyes were dark and intelligent. Tell me what happened. Chose her words carefully. Instructor called me forward for a demonstration. He said he would attempt a takedown and I should defend or escape. When he grabbed me, I used a defensive technique from my training. The throw was successful. Just a defensive technique, Al said. It was not a question. Nothing personal. No, sir. The instructor asked for a demonstration of defensive skills. I demonstrated them. Al leaned back in his chair. It creaked under his weight. You have been at this academy for 3 weeks. In that time, how has instructor treated you? This was dangerous ground. Complaining about an instructor could make her look weak, but lying would be worse. Met the Commandant's eyes directly. He has been harder on me than other students, sir. He makes comments about humans being weak or inferior. He questions our history and our capabilities. During training, he criticizes my performance more than others, even when I perform adequately. And today he called me forward in front of the class. He made it clear he expected to overpower me easily. I believe he wanted to use me as an example of human weakness. Al nodded slowly. I have been reviewing security footage from classes over the past 3 weeks. Your assessment matches what I see. He has been targeting you specifically. He pulled up more footage, saw herself in various training exercises. The footage showed criticizing her repeatedly while other students made similar mistakes without comment. The pattern was undeniable. This is not the first time, Al continued. Last year, another human attended the academy. His name was Price. Excellent scores in all technical areas, strong performance in combat training, failed him anyway, cited lack of warrior spirit. Remembered what Kay had told her. Why was allowed to continue teaching if he shows such clear bias? Because he produces results, Al said bluntly. His students graduate and become excellent soldiers. The academy values that. However, the Galactic Council has been pushing for more integration, more acceptance of newer species like humans. There is resistance to this among some instructors. Opposes human admission. He opposes admission of any species he considers weak. He believes the academy should maintain traditional standards. He sees humans as soft, untested in real warfare. Al stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the stars for a moment before continuing. What you did today was remarkable. Has trained for decades. He has fought in actual wars, and you threw him like a beginner. Technique and leverage, sir. Size is not everything. Clearly, Al turned back to face her. You could file a formal complaint. The footage supports claims of harassment and bias, would face disciplinary action, possibly suspension. Considered this carefully. Filing complaints would create enemies. It would mark her as someone who could not handle difficulty. Other instructors might treat her with suspicion, and if he remained at the academy, would never forgive her. I would prefer not to file charges, sir, she said finally. I came here to learn and to prove that humans belong in the galaxy. Filing complaints does not accomplish that. Al studied her face. You understand he will likely make training harder for you now. His pride is wounded. That makes him dangerous. I understand, sir, but I can handle difficult training. What I cannot accept is being dismissed as inferior without a chance to prove otherwise. A slight smile crossed the commandant's face. You remind me of soldiers I served with long ago. They also refused to quit despite impossible circumstances. Very well. No formal complaint will be filed. However, I will be monitoring classes more closely. Thank you, sir. Dismissed, return to your barracks. Stood and saluted. She left the office feeling both relieved and anxious. No punishment, but also no protection from whatever might do next. The barracks were crowded when she returned. Several students from her class were gathered in the common area. They stopped talking when she entered. The silence was awkward. Kay approached first. Are you in trouble? No, the commandant just wanted to understand what happened. What did happen? Asked En. The big looked genuinely curious. I have never seen anyone throw, never even heard of it happening. Shrugged, he grabbed me. I used to throw, that is all. That is not all, said En from across the room. You made it look easy, like throwing a training dummy. Other students began asking questions. Where did she learn that technique? Could she teach them? How long had she trained? Answered what she could but kept her responses simple. She did not want to seem like she was bragging. After an hour, the group dispersed. Students headed to their individual rooms to rest before dinner. Found herself alone in the common area with En. They sat down heavily in a chair that groaned under his weight. I want to apologize for, not all think like him. Many of us respect humans. You are new to the galaxy, but you learn quickly. Thank you, said. I know he does not speak for your whole species. He is old, En explained. Set in his ways, he grew up during the border wars with the clans. Those were brutal conflicts. He learned to measure everything by strength and toughness. Anything else seems weak to him. I understand tradition is important, but the galaxy is changing. En nodded. Yes, and people like must change with it or be left behind. That evening lay in her bed thinking about everything. She had stood up too. She had proven human technique could overcome size and strength. But what came next? The instructor would not simply accept this lesson and move on. His pride demanded some response. She pulled out her data pad and searched for information on human martial arts. The galactic database had very little. A few brief mentions of combat sports, some outdated information about military training. Nothing that explained the depth and sophistication of human fighting systems. Curious, she searched for what other students might be learning about humans. There were recent searches from her classmates. Someone had looked up judo and found detailed records. Others had searched for human warfare and discovered documentation of World War I, World War II, and various other conflicts throughout history. The database showed videos of judo competitions, human practitioners throwing opponents twice their size, submissions that forced larger fighters to tap out, evidence that technique could overcome raw power. Other searches showed human history, the development of nuclear weapons, near-extinction conflicts that were avoided through diplomacy, millions dead in wars that spanned continents. Earth's history was not peaceful. It was just that humans had learned to control their violent tendencies. Closed the data pad and turned off the light. Outside her window, stars stretched into infinity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, would be planning something. She needed to be ready. But tonight she had sent a message. Humans were not weak, they were not inferior. They were different, and 3 days passed with no sign of. Substitute instructors led the combat training classes. They were professional and fair, treating all students equally, almost missed harsh methods. At least with him, she knew what to expect. The other students had changed their attitudes toward her. Where before they had been polite but distant, now they sought her advice. During breaks, they asked about human martial arts. How did judo work? What other fighting systems did humans develop? Could she show them some techniques? Was careful not to seem like she was teaching. The instructors had that role, but she answered questions and demonstrated basic concepts when asked. Leverage, balance, using an opponent's strength against them. The same principles her first instructor had taught her at age 6. Kay became particularly interested. It was naturally quick and agile, which fit well with judo's emphasis on timing. During free practice time, showed her a basic hip throw. Kay picked it up quickly, throwing a student twice her size on her 3rd attempt. "This is amazing," Kay said, breathing hard from excitement. "All my life I thought being small was a weakness. This technique turns it into an advantage." "Not an advantage," corrected. "Just a different approach. Big and strong is good, small and technical is also good. Different situations need different solutions." On the 4th day, returned to teaching. He walked into the training hall without explanation or apology. His expression was neutral, showing nothing of what he might be thinking. "Resume positions," he commanded. "Today we continue combat training. Yesterday's lessons focused on strikes and blocks. Today we will work on throws and takedowns." Felt 23 pairs of eyes turned toward her. His choice of topic could not be coincidence. He was addressing what had happened in his own way. The instructor demonstrated several throwing techniques. His form was solid and powerful. He explained weight distribution and timing. For the first time, noticed similarities between his methods and her judo training. The principles were the same even if the execution differed. When he called for students to practice, he did not single anyone out. He walked among the pairs, correcting form and offering advice. His criticism was evenly distributed now, received the same level of attention as everyone else. No more, no less. During a water break, noticed watching her. When their eyes met, he did not look away. He simply nodded once, a brief acknowledgement. Then he turned to help another student with their technique. The days fell into a new rhythm. Hard training, fair treatment, pushed all his students equally. His standards remained high, but his bias seemed to have disappeared. He never mentioned the incident, neither did anyone else in his presence. 2 weeks later, announced a major assessment. You will each face a combat simulation. These scenarios test everything you have learned. Tactics, combat skills, decision-making under pressure. Your performance affects your final ranking and job placement upon graduation. The simulation room was impressive. Holographic projectors created realistic environments and opponents. Pain feedback was reduced to safe levels but present enough to feel real. Students had died in these simulations by making fatal mistakes, though their actual bodies remained safe. Each student faced a different scenario matched to their abilities. Watched others complete their tests before her turn came. Some performed well, others struggled. Observed every simulation carefully, taking notes on a data pad. Finally, her name was called. She entered the simulation room and the door sealed behind her. Holographic controls asked her to confirm readiness. She pressed the accept button. The room transformed into an urban environment. Buildings rose around her. Distant sounds suggested a city under siege. A mission briefing appeared in her vision through the neural link. Hostages held in structure ahead. Enemy force of unknown size. Rescue hostages with minimal casualties. Time limit 15 minutes. The simulation began, moved carefully through the streets, using cover and checking corners. She spotted 3 enemies guarding the building entrance. Direct assault would be loud and attract more enemies. She needed a different approach. She circled the building and found a back entrance. One guard stood watch, used a technique she had practiced countless times. A quick approach from the guard's blind spot, an arm around his throat cutting off sound and air. He struggled, but she maintained the hold until he went limp. She lowered him quietly to the ground. Inside the building, she moved from room to room, 5 more enemies. She took 2 down with careful strikes before being spotted. The remaining 3 converged on her position. In the narrow hallway, their numbers were less effective. Let the first one rush her, then threw him into the second. Basic judo principle applied to combat. The 2 enemies collided and fell. The third tried to grab her from behind. She dropped her weight and threw him over her shoulder. His holographic body crashed into a wall and flickered out. She found the hostages in a locked room on the 2nd floor. 4 civilians, terrified but unharmed, hacked the door lock, a skill they had learned in technical training. The door opened. She led the hostages back through the building, moving quietly to avoid detection. They reached the exit with 12 minutes elapsed. Mission successful. The simulation ended and the room returned to normal. His heart was racing, but she felt good. She had completed the objective using intelligence and precision rather than brute force. In the observation room, all 4 instructors had watched her performance. The expression was thoughtful. The instructor was nodding with approval. Commandant Al had joined them to watch the final simulations. "Interesting approach," A commented. She avoided unnecessary combat, used the environment effectively, minimized risk to hostages. "Her hand-to-hand technique was clean," added another instructor, a named K. "She adapted judo throws to actual combat situations. Not many students think to do that." Said nothing, but he made notes on his data pad. That evening, after all simulations were complete, posted the rankings. Placed in the top 10% of the class. Not the highest score, but well above average. Several students ranked higher, including N and K, felt proud of all of them. The next day brought an unexpected development. After morning training, asked to remain behind. The other students left, giving her concerned looks. When the hall was empty, the instructor approached. "Your simulation performance was adequate," he said. "You showed good tactical thinking and combat effectiveness." "Thank you, instructor." Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone had changed slightly, less formal, more honest. "I have been teaching for 30 years. I have trained thousands of soldiers from dozens of species. I thought I understood what made a good warrior." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "You taught me something I should have already known. Strength takes many forms. The strongest species are not always the best soldiers. Sometimes technique and intelligence matter more than raw power." "My people had to learn that lesson early," said. "Humans are not the biggest or strongest. We developed other methods to survive." "Methods that work," acknowledged. "That throw you used on me, Ipanage you called it, it was perfectly executed. I have been thrown before, but never so completely." "You left yourself open. You were not expecting real resistance." "No, I was not." He met her eyes directly. "I underestimated you. I underestimated all humans. This was wrong of me. A good instructor adapts when new information appears. I have been slow to adapt." This was as close to an apology as would likely give, nodded in acceptance. "We all have things to learn, instructor. I came here to learn from you. You still have much you can teach me." "And perhaps you have things to teach as well," said. "I have spoken with the other instructors. We want to understand human combat systems better. Would you be willing to demonstrate your judo techniques? Show us the principles behind them?" Considered carefully, this was an opportunity but also a responsibility. "I would be honored, but I should not be seen as teaching the instructors. Perhaps I could assist in demonstrations." "That would be acceptable," actually smiled slightly. "In return, I will teach you combat methods. Our style emphasizes power, but there are techniques that might adapt to your abilities." "I would like that very much." They scheduled training sessions for the following week. Word spread quickly through the academy, a human cadet and an instructor exchanging knowledge. It was unusual, but it generated interest. The first session drew a crowd. Instructors from other classes came to watch, demonstrated basic judo principles on volunteer students. She explained leverage, balance points, and timing, watched carefully, asking technical questions. Then he showed techniques adapted for fewer than 4 arms, powerful strikes, aggressive takedowns, methods that emphasized forward momentum and controlled aggression. Practiced them, finding ways to make them work with human physiology. The exchange benefited both of them. More importantly, it benefited the entire academy. Other students saw that different species could learn from each other. That strength came in many forms, that the galaxy was richer for its diversity. 3 months later, graduation day arrived, stood with her class in dress uniforms. They had all survived the training. All 25 students remained, an unusual accomplishment. Normally, several would have quit. Commandant Al gave a speech about duty and honor. Then he called each student forward to receive their commendations. Once name was announced, stepped forward to present her award. Cole, he said formally, top 10% of your class in overall performance. Commendation for combat excellence. Commendation for tactical thinking, and a special recognition for contributions to academy training programs. He handed her the certificates and a small medal. Then, more quietly so only she could hear, he added, "You have earned your place here. Your people should be proud of you." "Thank you, instructor. You taught me well." "We taught each other," corrected. "That is how it should be." After the ceremony, students gathered for final goodbyes. Many were being assigned to different stations or ships, was heading to a diplomatic protection unit. Her combination of combat skills and cultural sensitivity made her valuable for security details involving multiple species. Kay hugged her tightly. "Thank you for showing us that being small does not mean being weak. I will remember that lesson always." N offered a traditional salute. "You have honor, Cole. If we serve together someday, I would be proud to fight beside you." As left the academy, she looked back at the training hall one last time. She had arrived 3 months ago as a human trying to prove herself. She was leaving as a soldier who had earned respect through skill and courage. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but Cole had learned an important truth. Humans belonged out here among the stars, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they could adapt, learn, and overcome obstacles through intelligence and determination. One student at a time, one lesson at a time, one flip at a time, humans were proving they deserved their place in galactic society. And it all started with a simple question: is class over, instructor? The answer now knew was no. Class was never over. There was always more to learn, more to prove, more to achieve, and she was ready for all of it. That difference had value. One throw had started to change minds. Now she had to prove it was not a fluke. Sleep came easier this time. She had faced her fear and won. Whatever came next, she would handle it the same way, with skill, courage, and the techniques her instructors on Earth had taught her. The galaxy was learning about humans, class by class, student by student, throw by throw, and Cole was leading the lesson. Took a deep breath and stepped through the door. Teaching methods were often painful. The instructor's eyes swept the group and stopped on. A slight smile crossed his face. Cole stepped forward. His heart rate increased, but she kept her breathing steady. This was it. The moment she had been expecting. She walked to the center of the mat and faced. "I will attempt a basic takedown," said to the class. "The human will try to defend or escape. This is a learning exercise. Everyone watch carefully." His tone suggested this would be more than just a learning exercise. He planned to humiliate her in front of the entire class, to prove once and for all that humans did not belong here. Took her stance, balanced, relaxed, ready. Around them, the other students formed a circle. In the observation deck above, the 3 other instructors leaned forward to watch. Moved toward her slowly, confidently. He was not even taking a proper fighting stance. To him, this was already over. A bed, a desk, a locker for her belongings. She opened the locker and looked at the photo inside, her father in his dress uniform. His face was serious, but his eyes were warm. "Show them what humans can do," he had told her before she left Earth. "Not with anger, not with pride, just with skill and courage." closed the locker and lay back on the bed. Tomorrow would be difficult, would try to make an example of her. She knew it as clearly as she knew her own name. The question was whether she would let him. She closed her eyes and went through the techniques in her mind. Hip throws, arm locks, sweeps, and trips. Her instructors on Earth had trained her well. Now she would find out if that training was enough. Outside her window, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning through space. Home seemed very far away, but had not come here to be comfortable. She came here to prove herself, and tomorrow she would get her chance.